Okay, it says it's recording.
Okay.
Go ahead, Beth. Take us away.
Okay, so I guess we're tentatively calling this honoring your health and gentle nutrition and everything that entails, right? So a while ago, it's crazy how long it's been actually. Kirsten and I had a conversation about, intuitive eating being more than just permission to eat donuts. It's also permission to eat salads. It's more than just, the fun foods. That nutrition has a place as well, right? And some people have this misconception that intuitive eating is devoid of nutrition, which is not true. And then a long time ago as well, Bree and I had a conversation about the nuance of health and what does that mean for each person, because that could be really kind of a blanket statement where people don't really understand or realize what they want or what they hope to experience if they were healthy, right?
Oh no. Did she freeze?
And so, I'm here. Did I freeze?
Go ahead. Yes, a little bit, but go for it.
Okay.
The joys of technology.
I know. Yay. So I wanted to mesh these two conversations together because last month it was on my radar a lot, this idea of health and nutrition, and how, thanks to diet culture, we have this black and white perspective of what it is and what it isn't, and there isn't room for nuance. And something that I was talking about a lot, at least in my sphere, and this is what I wanted to have a conversation with both of you about, is the idea of just giving yourself permission to eat first and foremost, whether that's a donut or a salad, because if you don't eat, you're not honoring your health. So I think sometimes we overcomplicate it by saying, oh, well, what should we eat? Instead of just saying, you know what, you need to eat something because something is better than nothing. So I kind of just wanted to open up this conversation about, how we can almost make intuitive eating its own diet, with its rules and regulations when that's not what it was meant to be, and how we can still kind of get stuck in our own self-perceived food fears or food rules as well. That then prevents us from just eating something. Because what happens if you don't eat? You die. So that's the gist of it, is honoring your health could be simplified to you have to eat something, whatever that might be. And then there's nuance in that for each individual eater. So
yeah, I think it's interesting with intuitive eating, like you were talking about, people can kind of turn it into a diet and turn it into this like, well, right now I'm craving French toast, but I don't have stuff at home to make French toast. Like, maybe if I can't eat French toast right now, then I'm doing intuitive eating wrong because I'm not like quote unquote perfectly honoring, what my body's asking for, or like what sounds really good. But I think it's interesting because I think one of the biggest things that I talk about with clients when I talk about gentle nutrition is really this, like, are you getting enough? Like, are you having is part of what's driving your chaotic eating just that you're simply not eating enough throughout the day, or like you're not in tune with your cues, so you're missing those opportunities to honor your hunger or whatever. So I think that many people end up not eating enough, and that, so yeah, I think that sometimes, like you're saying, sometimes it's just about like, can we get you something, like can we get some kind of nutrition in you? And that kind of ends up really supporting the whole intuitive eating process as well.
Yeah, I think too, I've heard Christy Harrison say before on her podcast that Isabel Foxenduke has referred to it sometimes as the hunger fullness diet, right? That's the perception that people have about intuitive eating. And there's two really important points that we have to talk about when we talk about intuitive eating. One is a point of access, right? Is that not everybody is able to have the opportunity to eat what they want when they want it, right? So there is privilege in that. And that too, it's, in the beginning, I always say intuitive eating is like opposite dieting, right? Where in the beginning of a diet, you have all these rules and all this structure, and you're like, okay, this is easy, I can do this. And then the more you keep doing, you're like, I can't do this. And intuitive eating is sort of flipped, where it's like there's all of this freedom and you're like, wait, I can't do this, this is hard. And the more you learn it, the more nuanced it becomes, that it becomes as easy as breathing. But in the beginning phases, it really is unlearning all of these ingrained messages that we have taken through the years, and sort of sifting them out and sorting them out of what's true for me, what's accessible to me, what can I do within the means that are available to me, and what's truly honoring your body, because I think honoring your body is honoring your health.
I love that. Also, first of all, I love that idea about the it being like reverse dieting. But when you first said that, what I was kind of thinking of too is like with dieting, it's like in the beginning, like there's all these rules and structure, and like things kind of seem like very well controlled. And then the end result of a diet is like this chaos and like overeating or whatever. Whereas intuitive eating is like in the beginning for many people, not all, but for many people, it's like this chaotic, blah, 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 like I can't get control of this. And then the end result is, of course, this like ironic control around food because you're just so well nourished and like not deprived.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh, you're so right. That's crazy. I hadn't quite thought of it in that like exact flip. But
that's
yes, you're right. And I think it's not at least what I've seen out there in the community of social media, which I think unfortunately that's probably where most people either learn or mislearn about intuitive eating, is not only the idea of, like you said, the hunger fullness diet, but it's the what do I want to eat diet. And it's not just that either. Because again, and you had both said, it's not just like, oh, I want this thing. What happens if you can't have that thing? Food insecurities is real. If you don't have access to that food, either because you can't afford it or your kids are sleeping and so you don't want to leave the house at midnight, even though you're craving this thing, like it's not just a craving satisfaction diet either, and so I think in those moments, again, if you're I don't want to say goal, what's the word I'm looking for, if really the outcome you're wanting is to honor your health, and certainly honoring your hunger cues and your satiety cues plays into that for sure, as well as what foods are enjoyable, pleasurable, satisfactory, like all of that plays a role for sure. But I think in those moments, especially if you're prone to under eating, is asking yourself, do I just need to eat something? Has it been a few hours? It's like that kind of that bare minimum threshold of, am I getting enough? I want to say, am I getting enough calories? Like, am I getting enough energy in order to move my body in the way it wants to be moved? Especially if you think about like counteracting the whole bull crap 1,200 calorie minimum day requirement that we hear thrown around all the time, right?
Yeah. I would love for Kristen to talk about this as the dietitian here. Yes. Or if anyone else wants to jump in, you can as well. But I too wonder is like, oh crap, I lost my thought. It's something along the lines of you said, we're prone to under eating, right? And so like wanting to listen to our bodies. I think that satisfaction it's like a joyous part of the experience. So it's not necessarily the outcome, but it's part of the process. And so when you can really connect to your body and say, ooh, like I know I need to eat, I know last night I ate dinner and it just was not what I wanted. And I was disappointed, and that's okay. And I was like, tomorrow's a new day where I will have opportunities to eat exactly what I want to eat or not. But I also know what I hear a lot of times from people is they don't have hunger cues. They don't have the physical hunger cues. So how are we supposed to honor our body? And like, I know for me, I usually get hunger cues because I stay up way too late. So it'll be like midnight. And then there's all these like myths of like, you can't eat past a certain time and you should drink water and blah, blah, blah. So it's unlearning these messages, but also hey, what if you don't know? What if you're not connected to your body and you don't know that you're hungry? So I would love for Kirsten to talk about that as the
Yeah.
dietitian.
Yeah. Well, I think that's so interesting because I think that it's actually very prevalent for there to be people who don't have these cues coming up, whatever. And I think that a big part of it is tied to metabolism. So when we are under eating because we think that that's how much we're supposed to be eating because of these crazy ideas or whatever, or another thing is like, well, actually, I'm going to put a pin in that. So when we're under eating, it's going to affect our metabolism. It's going to slow things down. Naturally, things are going to be moving at a slower rate to try to conserve energy and whatever. And ultimately, like, that's going to lead to us not having those hunger cues because essentially your body's like, you know what, why am I going to expend energy giving her these cues when she's not honoring them anyway? Like, let's just stop spending energy there. So literally, they just, you don't end up getting those cues. And then later on in the day, then that's when like the cues can finally kind of set in. And that's one of the reasons why we end up seeing people, eating more later on in the day, because their body's kind of finally catching up. The other thing to think about that, also gets in the way of hunger cues is stress, right? So like if somebody is very stressed in their life, they've got a lot going on for whatever reason, or just like chronically stressed, their body's not gonna kind of give them those consistent cues that will kind of mute them. So there's so many things at play that can go into somebody not having cues. Another big one is like weight loss surgery, right? I have a history working with weight loss surgery patients, and I know Bree, you've experienced this, but that impacts hunger cues, and many times, especially in the beginning, not necessarily forever, these patients are not having hunger cues. So I mean, the way that like I feel like I've even heard Evelyn Tribole put it this way, but sometimes it's got to be eating for self-care, not because there's a cue there.
Like mechanical eating in a way.
Yeah.
Right? Of just like, I know I have to eat. So like, it's a lot of what we do in eating disorder recovery is just like, we're going to eat and I know this is what I have to do because when you're eating regularly, that's when the cues will come back in, right? Of, hey, okay. And so I think another thing too, this has been a really big topic for me in terms of, right, and I'm using air quotes, holistic health, right? When we talk about honoring our health, we think of dieting and weight loss, right? But we don't think about managing our stress. We don't think, like we think it, but that's not the go-to of, hey, maybe I have a lot of stress going on in my life that maybe I need to sleep more or say no to things more and set healthier boundaries so that I can get up and eat breakfast and do the things that I need to do. And that's not the first conversation we have when we talk about honoring our health.
Yeah. And just to like tie it back in and circle back, like you said, like some of the first things we think of are dieting and what do you say, weight loss, whatever.
Yeah.
We also don't think about just getting enough food, like getting enough energy in our bodies. That's not like, it's like actually preferable in diet culture to just not, to deprive yourself to lose weight, to, be in this calorie deficit than it is to actually properly nourish your body by giving it the energy it actually needs to function normally.
Yeah. And this is probably a much deeper conversation than this, but what I have been experiencing in my own work with clients is that there is a body dissociation a lot of times for people who are amidst even disordered eating recovery, that they don't connect to their bodies. They've lived their entire lives disconnecting from their body. So now it's like, no, we want you to feel it all. And it's too much. It can be so overwhelming. And so I think there's this overarching link to disordered eating and body trauma of how we have just learned to numb and to distance and to cut off. But when we're like, no, I want you to feel satisfied when you eat. Or on the alternative of, hey, this particular meal or whatever, or eating past comfortable fullness or whatever, it causes me discomfort. Okay, then we have to sit in that. We have to figure out what your gremlins or, the negative self-talk is saying to you, so we can move past that, so we can heal from that. And so I think it's a large conversation that's missing when we talk about honoring our body, is the disconnection to our body.
That's super interesting.
What do you think,
That's
Beth?
super interesting.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go grab my charger,
No,
so I will be
I'm
right
with all
back.
of it. I'm just like nodding the whole time, like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What I hear a lot is when people are prone to under eating, I hear that a lot, that, well, I don't get hungry, so then that means I don't have to eat, right? And I'm like, well, no, not necessarily. I call it food apathy, because
Mm,
if you have gone for so long ignoring your hunger cues, you're not going to have them. You just won't.
mm,
And so that's why I think honoring your health can include mechanical eating. It can include that bare minimum caloric need, right? That, like, okay, that eating for self-care. Not that everyone, I mean, we're not babies, right? It's not like we have to eat every 2 hours, per se. Maybe some people do, and that's fine. But if it's been like 12 hours or 10 or 6 or whatever, and you haven't eaten something, then maybe you should probably eat something. You know what I mean? You can't just rely on your hunger cues, especially if you've spent years or you have a traumatic response and you've disconnected from your body.
mm-hmm.
So there, I think, again, there's that element of, this is what makes it really hard to just say, well, it's intuitive, because sometimes you might not have a strong intuition
Intuition.
when it comes to food and body. And
I have to
what
jump in
was
here.
someone
So
gonna
I
say
was
something?
at the Fancy.
Yes.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I was
Yes.
at the
Go.
Fancy conference, whenever that was, a couple weekends ago, and I watched the talk with Evelyn Tribbley and Elise Resch on intuitive eating and what every dietitian should know. Yeah, it was super cool. But what they said in one of the first slides of their presentation was that, intuitive, something along the lines of like, it's not, one of the myths about intuitive eating is that it's instinctual, or it's all instinctual. And I think that basically what they were talking about was like, people assume like, oh, it's like, oh, okay, when I'm hungry, I eat, and then whatever, like, and it's like, okay, that's the end of it. But the reality is that there's so much nuance here, and that's what gets missed. That's what gets missed. And I think in this conversation, when we think about like people getting confused about, well, my body's not telling me that I'm hungry right now, so I guess that I don't eat. Like, I guess that means I don't eat. But the reality is like, part of intuitive eating is like these different layers of mind, body, and spirit. And like, maybe your body isn't telling you that it's hungry and it needs food right now, but your mind knows, oh, listen, I've just slept all night and now it's been a couple hours since I've been, woke up. Like, I need to eat. I know that. And that's part of intuitive eating.
Yeah, I have this thought often too, where it's like, it's such a strange example, but like, I don't get thirsty very often. I can go a really long time without drinking, but yet I know I need to drink water, or I need to drink something. Like, if I get to the end of the day, I'm like, I haven't drank any water today. I know that that's not good. And I don't know if any of you are familiar. I have this thing called vasovagal, which means like my blood pressure drops very quickly, especially if I like bend over or anything. And the thing that helps me the most is hydration. So especially in the summer when it's really hot, I start to feel like that dizziness. All I know is I need to drink a lot of water, and that can help mitigate the symptoms. It's not like I've been feeling thirsty, but I know my body's going to crash if I don't. And the same would go for even like, again, like an instinct, like of going to the bathroom. We don't think about when we have to go to the bathroom. We just go. If you're not going, there's an indication something might not be right if you're not going. But we see not going to the bathroom or not, drinking enough water as something of concern, whereas we see not eating as like a sign of like, hey, that's pretty cool, I'm not hungry. But then when we're hungry, we're like, what's wrong? Why am I so hungry?
Yes.
So much
Well
judgment,
Yes.
right? That's met with it. And I remember a friend of mine, Molly Kate Wellness, she did a podcast with my other friend, Kelsey Pukala, who's an RD, and they said something interesting on the podcast. That's like when women are in their menses, that they need like 500 more calories than they would on a normal basis. And I was like, that makes sense why I'm always ravenous on my period. Right? It's because your body is doing so much more. It makes sense, right? Not that anybody's counting, but that it makes sense why there are times where you're hungrier and when you're not. But that
Right.
intuition it's a learned and a comfortability. It is connecting to your body, but it might not be automatic. It might not be in the beginning, but it's meeting it without the judgment piece. And I think that's the piece that we're facing.
Because you're right too with that. Like, people are so judgmental of themselves. Like, oh my gosh, I'm on my period and I'm craving all this, and I need all this extra food and I'm ravenous. And it's like, this is so bad. How do I control this? Like, maybe you don't need to control it. Maybe it's your body doing its thing and it needs extra calories, so it's going to drive you to them.
Like, we don't ever, like, I never am like, oh man, I peed 3 times in the last hour. I'm never like, why am I doing that? We would never approach it. We'd be like, what did I drink? Like, what is going on? But sans the judgment, right? But when there's hunger, we're like, what is going on? And I think there's a fear piece to that, right? Because it feels, especially if you're working with people who have a history of claiming that they've been addicted to food, quote unquote, or feeling out of control around food, that feeling of ravenous hunger can feel scary. And wanting to make space for that too, though.
For sure. This is making me think of too, like, something I see a lot with clients related to not eating enough is like, again, the judgment comes in when it's like, oh, I'm never hungry for breakfast in the morning. Like, I'm good or something, right? Like, if there's this like judgment of like, oh, it's really good of me that I'm not hungry at this part of the day. But then ironically, that not eating and not kind of eating just for out of self-care in that moment leads to the chaotic eating later in the day, which becomes this judgment of, oh my God, I'm so bad. What's wrong with me? What do I need to do to control this? But it's ironic because if they just ate something, or, if you just eat something earlier in the day out of self-care, it's going to kind of prevent that chaos later.
And I think that's another piece too, is that if you are somebody who, let's say is just like recovering from disordered eating, that it's not eating disorder behavior, but you're just used to not eating in the morning and I'm going to go on a cup of coffee, and then you get home and then you're like, wow, I'm eating a lot. Of even just recognizing this is my body trying to make up for not getting enough during the day. And that let's try. And so, I know one of the things that I'll do with when I work with people is, okay, like, well, now that you can recognize that, are there any points in the day where you could throw a snack in there? Can we throw some snacks in your desk or in your car? I keep car snacks like a toddler because I'm like, when it hits, I need something now. And it has to be something that's like going to be able to withstand the weather. So there might not be my favorite snacks, but like I keep rice cakes in my car just because I'm like, they will hold through any weather and like peanuts and stuff like that. But that and I don't know if anyone else will experience this too. There are times where it's like, there's like a little window where I'm like, ooh, I could eat now. And if you push past it, you're like, okay, I'm good. And it's not, it's like it's a false goodness. So I'm like, if I eat now, if I honor that in that moment, I will be less insatiable later on in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so funny. I love that you bring that up. So a couple things. One, I am one of those people ever since I was young. So this was before I was like dieting or, stuck in diet culture. I don't typically wake up starving. I'm not usually a hungry morning person. But nowadays, I know that I still should probably eat something. I'm not going to force myself to eat, like a huge 3-course meal right first thing in the morning. But I'll have something to give me some energy until I'm ready to eat more later, and I think that goes back to that honoring your health, self-care. And I work a lot with moms, and it's like, if you plan for your kids' needs, why can't you do the same for yourself? Like I say, like, pack your own diaper bag, right? You get ready for like, hey, have you eaten something, child? Maybe you're hungry. Here, I have something. Like, you get to do that for yourself. And I love, again, bringing it back to what Kirsten had said about like intuition is more, I think you'd said, kind of like a body, mind, spirit approach, right? It's not just instinctive or gut response. And so what I like to do for myself is to have a conversation, right? It's like, oh, I think maybe you don't feel hungry right now, but I know that you've got a big day ahead of you, so I know that it's probably in our best interest to eat something. Does anything sound good? And then to branch off even more and again, I think this addresses the whole, it's not just a what sounds good diet either, right? If my body's like, well, nothing sounds good, well, I know that I probably need a balance of nutrients, those macros that are so important for our health. And so I'll say, is there any protein that sounds good? Anything. Like, I don't have, limitations on these things. That's where I get the food freedom. But there's like a gentle parenting of myself of like, I know you need a little bit more of this because we haven't had it or because you haven't eaten enough. So within this realm or these guidelines, what sounds good, or what do we have? What do you have access to that is doable? Maybe something sounds good, but we can't do it, or maybe it's not necessarily the best time or place, and it's kind of like Bree, I might be starving at midnight because I've stayed up late, and so yeah, my body's going to say, hey, we need food, right? I'm probably not going to eat a 3-course meal at midnight because I know that I probably won't sleep well, but that doesn't mean I don't eat anything. It means I could eat a snack. So I think there's a balance here, and where people experience that chaos and the
Oh no, it froze again.
intuitive eating. Well, just tell me what to do. What's the checklist? When is okay and when is not okay? As opposed to just leaning into that and having a conversation with yourself.
Right.
And saying, what's going on? Here's what's possible. What can we do for you? And having that kind of a relationship. That's why it's called a relationship, right?
Yeah.
So
I
do
like
you
that
have
you
a
call
relationship with your body?
the gentle parenting. I think just like, before we went, trick-or-treating, I told my niece and nephew, let's go to the bathroom. I don't have to go. Let's try anyway, right? Because you might not have to go now, but I don't want to be down the block and for us to have a problem, right? And so it's that gentle guidance. But the thing I wanted to say, Beth, is like, okay, so if I'm hungry at midnight, I'm not going to have a 3-course meal, but you have permission to. And that's the difference between food freedom and dieting, is that there are no rules of like what's allowed and what's not allowed. If you want a chicken breast for breakfast and you want, I don't know, pancakes for dinner, you can do that. If you want to make a 3-course meal and you have the freedom to go out and buy all the ingredients to make French toast at midnight, you can. We recognize that as like access, as privilege, because not everyone's able to. But the other point I wanted to bring into this too is, it is not just a what sounds good diet. And I really liked how you said that. One of the things that I've had to do for myself, and I know, Beth, you helped me with this a little bit, is how do I want to feel? I've shared very, very honestly about my struggle with IBS as well. And so oftentimes, even if something sounds good, I have to think, how's that going to make me feel in an hour? So like tonight, I really wanted a latte from Starbucks, so I stopped. If I don't feel good in an hour, I'm home. It doesn't matter. If I'm going to work and there's a potential that I'm going to be in somebody's home or in an office, I might skip it just because I'm not sure how I'm going to feel. There's permission to. I have absolute permission to if I want to. But it's really just thinking about how I want to feel. So even if, okay, I know I'm going to be, I know that I went down to the beach this summer and they were making Taylor ham, egg, and cheese sandwiches. We call it Taylor ham here. I don't know what you guys call it in the other parts of the world. I think it's called pork roll. But I was like, man, if I eat that and then sit on the beach all day, I probably am not going to feel my best. It's not that food is bad. It's not that I would be bad if I ate it. But I was thinking in the long run, I want to be able to sit on the beach all day and get tan and not have to worry about being sick. So I'm going to opt for something else. And there's that permission piece there. And I think a lot of times we're still working through the nuances of that, of, oh, like I have to say yes, and then I don't feel good. And I think part of honoring your health is really connecting to, well, what feels good? What not only sounds good, but how do you want to feel when you're done eating that?
Right. Yes. I'm so glad you clarified that, because it is all about permission and no judgment. Right. So again, like you can eat whatever, however, whenever you want. And that means no judgment from outside sources or for yourself. So if you eat something knowing that maybe you won't feel good later, that doesn't, as you said, doesn't make the food bad, and it doesn't make you bad as an eater. Right. Yeah, exactly. It doesn't make you bad. It's just like, oh, okay. Like it's just feedback, right? So that next time You can choose the same thing, or you could choose something different. It's your choice. Like I think that's what's so freeing. It's my choose, my choice to choose what I want to eat, and but it doesn't have to say anything about me. It doesn't mean anything about me. It's just food. And that is very fun.
Did anyone see my burger on Instagram the other day?
No.
Oh my God.
Recently?
It was from Bear Burger. It was
Oh.
a burger with onion rings and regular French fries and this, I forgot what sauce they had onion rings on top. Yo, so good. And I was in so much pain. And I took, because I'm lactose intolerant too, I took Lactaid and I was like, YOLO. And man, it's so much discomfort later. But I was able to honor my body in that, like, I was like, hey, I want this. I know what could happen. This doesn't make me bad or good. And I think also too, sort of bringing in wellness culture into this is that, like, oftentimes we blame the food immediately. It's like, oh, what did I eat? I knew that this was probably not going to end well, but just because I know my stomach. But it's no longer this, I ate this, it was bad and I'm bad. This was amazing and delicious. I enjoyed it. And then the next day I was like, I'm going to need something a little light in the morning.
Yeah.
And a little gentle, and just being able to honor my body in that way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that, like, you know, when we get the problem with judgment, I mean, there's a lot of problems with it, but it's kind of a dead end. It doesn't allow us to take in the information and figure out what we want to do, whatever. It just like leads to this weird cycle. And whereas in your case, where there wasn't the judgment because you've done all this work, the next day you were able to, like, listen to what your body had to say, and it was like, okay, like, maybe I'm gonna have a little bit something different, or whatever, something that's gonna make me feel good today because that's what I want. Whereas that could have gone a very different way if you were stuck in the judgment cycle. So there's this kind of I can't think of the word. Your body's like recalibrating. It's figuring out. It's adjusting. It's responding to the meal that you had previously that you decided to do, and it figures it out if we can listen to that feedback.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Cool.
I love this conversation. Do you have any
I
thoughts?
know, this is great.
I kind of have one thought, if you don't mind jumping.
Please.
Okay. So just kind of what I loved what you were talking about, Bree, in terms of you knew, like, what the consequences are, or more or less what the possible reactions are for your body. And it was just such a good representation of, like, body autonomy. And really that kind of gentle nutrition involvement in body autonomy. And I think of, because I work with families and kiddos, and so I always think of, like, families that create this fear around foods, especially if they have an allergy. And I think about, like, food allergies being, like, a really common thing that people are so scared of. And then in addition to food allergies, you have all this information about the food industry and things like that. And so people really just wrap up this fear around a food allergy or a specific food. And even with kiddos that have, like, severe anaphylaxis around food allergies, you can still have, like, food neutrality. Like, you can still be neutral around food. You don't have to call it good or bad. You don't have to call it healthy or unhealthy. If that food is still neutral in your book, but you as a human and as a person, as a kiddo, know that that food gives your body a specific reaction, you have the autonomy to make the choice as to whether or not you're going to partake in that food. Some people have different levels of allergies, so they can, like you said, sometimes you can take Lactaid and you can be okay, and you're like, that was worth it for me, that was amazing, would do it again. Other people don't necessarily have that choice. They're like, I smell a peanut, on the plane from 3 seats down, and I have a, like, allergic reaction. And it's very scary for those families. And it's really, like, I feel for them because they live in a sense of fear, or they usually also had a really bad reaction to finding out that they had a peanut allergy or whatever allergy that they have. So they have a little bit of trauma there to unpack. But if you approach it as like, you know, a food, like if you're able to neutralize all food, including that food that you're allergic to, and then if you're able to, because it's amazing that the food industry has alternatives usually to these foods, if you have access to that, usually you can find alternatives to something, and it doesn't have to be that like continuing traumatic experience of constantly avoiding and constantly being scared. If you're educated and families are educated and people are educated, then they have the autonomy and the power to make their choices. So for example, like Wow butter is totally made out of, I think, soybean or something. And usually it's school safe. You can bring it to school, but it's an alternative to peanut butter. And it's one of those things where they're like, well, I loved peanut butter, but then I had a severe peanut reaction. I cannot have it, but maybe I can try this. And this is like providing similar nutrition, providing gentle nutrition, also getting a little bit of that satisfaction factor. But like, I recognize peanut butter is not a terrible thing. It's just my body reacts different to it. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, I really love even just the phrasing of recognizing the consequences, because I think people automatically think consequences are a bad thing, but consequences mean outcome, right? What is the outcome going to be? And there are days where people who know me, I will choose mostly to be dairy free in a lot of my decisions by choice. Like I don't feel like I'm missing out because I don't choose cheese. I just know that I don't like how I feel when and I keep lactate literally almost everywhere just in case, because I don't want the option of not having it. But there are times where I know like something like that, where it's also like with the burger, there's grease and there's fried food. So there was like a triple whammy, but it would have felt like restriction to not choose it because, you know, it's a bad food or because of the way it makes me feel. In that moment, I was like, this is the right to choose my food and my body, how it's going to react. And yeah, I think that being able to come to peace with that, I know for me, there's a lot of dairy-free options that I prefer to the regular dairy option at this point in my life. And when people are like, oh man, that's so sad, I'm like, no, it's not for me because it's a choice and I'm empowered to make that choice. And there are times where I will choose to eat cheese or ice cream or, you know, but it's my choice and there's the freedom to do that. So I like that. Go ahead, Beth, what were you going to say?
No, I love that you're bringing this up again, that power to choose. I think sometimes there's a lot of fear behind, well, if I'm always listening to my intuition or my cravings and what my body wants, then I'm a slave to my body. Like, I don't get to choose. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, for some people, that's really scary. It's almost easier to say, well, just tell me what to eat than trust yourself to tell you what to eat, because you're like, well, what if I don't like that outcome, right? And so again, this goes back to it's a conversation you get to have with your body. You get to say, you have permission to eat this thing. It says nothing about you. You know, the food is neutral. And do you need something else? You know, it doesn't like try to put you in one box or the other, right? It's not, there's no judgment here. Again, it's like, this is a conversation I would have with my children, which is, yes, you can have the donut for breakfast. That's great. It's so fun. It's yummy. And it's going to be a long day today. Is there a protein that sounds good as well? Like, what can you add to it? I think it's when you come from this place of, it's an either or, like instead of an and situation of, no, I either have to eat this food or I don't get to eat it. It's like, well, what if you can have both? Or what if now is not the right time for whatever reason, but it doesn't say anything about the food or you, so your options are more open in that way, instead of, well, I either eat what an expert tells me to eat, or I always eat what my body tells me to eat, even if I know it's going to make me sick. No, there's more options here. There's more freedom when you approach it from this, you know, what do I want and what do I need? And
yeah.
You know, coming from that place of honoring your health again. So
Yeah, I feel like this is the second biggest thing that always comes up with my work with clients. When I talk about gentle nutrition, it's this idea of addition, because diet culture is all about like you're saying, black and white thinking, this or that. You're either doing a good job or you're doing a bad job. And gentle nutrition is not about like, what is the most nutrient dense food I could possibly eat right now and then, get rid of everything else. Gentle nutrition is what sounds really good to me and sounds like really satisfying, and also what is going to honor my health. And also, like, obviously that hopefully will be connected to being satisfying in some way, right? You can choose, you can choose what sounds the most satisfying within that category. But gentle nutrition, basically, it's all about addition, really to, balance from that place of addition rather than subtraction.
Well, and I think too that we definitely want to be careful too, because I think diet culture has commandeered some of these phrases also, like everything in moderation or like crowding out. And that's not what we're talking about here. And
Right.
So right, when we approach intuitive eating, we want to approach it with curiosity rather than criticism. And so maybe your kids have the donut and they just eat the donut. And then, hey, how did you feel today with just having the donut? It was really good and really good, great, but I got really hungry in like 3 hours. I wonder what we could do next time that you could still have that donut, but not then be hungry again in 3 hours. And right, of just seeing it as a learning opportunity. You don't do intuitive eating wrong. The only way you do intuitive eating wrong is if you're also trying to do it for weight loss. So that's right. There's no screwing up. Like if you don't quote unquote choose right, you see it as a learning opportunity. And then next time you bank that as I call it like a learning experiment of, okay, this is what happened this time. So when I get in that situation again, I remember what happened that time. Let me see how I can problem solve this differently.
Yeah, it's like the experience of it all. And it's like like I think that that's such an important reframe for many clients I work with, is to steer it away from, oh, this was a bad day because XYZ happened, because that's what diet culture talk is all about, to like you're saying, what can I learn from this? How can I serve my body, serve my health better next time if I want to? Like, what would that look like? And it's really, and I like the conversation about the donut and the kids and whatever. It's like leading with their own experience rather than saying like, oh, like maybe you should add this to that. It's like allowing their experience to be the guide, allowing them to figure it out rather than saying, oh, this would be a good idea to do this,
I think that must be so hard because, I'm not a parent, so I can't imagine being like, but I know what's going to be good for you. Trust me. But it's really right. Going back to that body autonomy of I'm going to let the kids sort of be in charge of listening to their own bodies. And so I know like with Halloween that just passed, a lot of posts going around about just letting kids eat the candy that really and truly if they get sick, that's a learned experience, right? If they overeat on candy, then they will take that and they'll be like, maybe I shouldn't do that next time, or I don't want to feel that way next time. But that when we restrict and we say, no, you can only have this much, then you're limiting and you're putting these restrictions around, which could cause kids to sneak food or, all these different experiences. Or, there was like a lot of different posts on how to, help kids. But even as an adult, I remember I posted something on Halloween that even just a few years ago, I would buy all of the candy that I don't like so that I wouldn't eat any of it. And then my dad would get all of the best candy and I'd be like, Dad, why are you doing that? And so then every day I'd be like, I'm just going to have one. Okay, I'm going to have one more. Okay, I have this. Okay, I'm going to have just 4. And then it would be like, wow, like, why do I feel this crazy around candy? Whereas now I can literally have candy whenever I want, that I can count how many times I went in the bowl because that is how little I cared about it, because I know the freedom and the relationship I have with it. So it's like, I don't get a medal because I didn't eat any candy, but it's just like, hey, wow, it just feels really nice to not feel like out of control around something that we make such a big deal like one time a year,
Yeah, and I love that reframe too, because I think that sometimes, again, when you're looking at intuitive eating from the diet culture lens, it's like, oh, like I'm going to do intuitive eating so then I don't eat so much candy, like, or whatever. But it's like the reality is like what you're saying. It's like, no, it's just like, can we bring it back to how it feels? Like it feels good to not feel like, oh my God, I need to eat all this candy. And then, oh my God, now I don't feel good and whatever. Like, it's like, it's from a place of, again, honoring your body, honoring your health, and doing things that are going to make you think about food less and like be less crazy around food, so that you can just like enjoy what's really important.
That I have so much more brain space that if I eat like 4 pieces of candy, it's like, cool, I'm going to move on with my day now, as opposed to, oh my God, what did I just do? Right. And going back to, right, honoring your health, it also has to look at your relationship to food, right? And so that feeling of feeling out of control is not a great feeling. And I understand and I empathize with that. And so kind of tying it all back together, one of the ways that I think people can circumvent that feeling out of control of food is by regulating how often they eat. Okay, if you're not eating enough, you're going to feel crazy around food. That is I know that was my experience, was that I wasn't eating enough during the day, or I was cutting out certain macronutrients because I thought that's what you're supposed to do. And then by the time I got to nighttime, I was like, I'm so hungry. I can't be satiated. And so and tying that all back together, honoring your health is not just looking at what you're eating, but how you feel about what you're eating.
Yeah.
Mic drop.
I love that. Yeah. Can you hear me? My thing is starting to cut out, so I might have to leave soon.
Yeah. We're coming up on an hour.
Because this could be a complete tangent. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that I know this could be a complete tangent, but I don't want to go off, like completely off the deep end. But so far we've just been talking about physical health and how you can honor your physical health with food. But there is so much more that is possible, whether that's emotional health and well-being, or even spiritual or mental. There's so much more to health than just physical health. And I think just to throw this out as an example, I was working with someone who genuinely couldn't eat cake without having some major physical reactions, right? And it was her birthday. And she's like, well, what do I do, Beth? I think we sometimes get stuck in this idea of the only way we can experience food is by eating it. But that's not true. And kids are great at this, right? They love to experience food. They make the craziest concoctions, or they just sit and play with it and they don't eat it at all. So what I had this lady do is, I said, you can still enjoy a cake on your birthday without having to eat it. If you truly don't want to eat it and you don't want to deal with those consequences, keep eating it. But if you genuinely don't want the cake for your own reasons, then what else is possible with this cake? What else could you experience with it? And so she got her family together and they had a cupcake war. They literally had a food fight. And she said it was one of the most satisfying birthdays she'd ever had with cake. And she didn't even eat it. So I think, again, honoring your health can be.
Uh-oh. Beth.
She looks cute frozen though.
Wow, we really lost her this time.
I know. She did say she was breaking up a little bit. I do think that's an interesting concept though, of experiencing your food, right, without eating it. But it actually makes me think of a therapeutic concept of you guys are gonna be like, what? That's a therapeutic concept of play, right? I think that we often think, I remember Stuart Brown, he's the author, he used to be hey, you're there.
Hi.
So I was just hopping in while you were disappeared for a second, about experiencing food without eating, but just this concept of play, right? When we think about kids, they're so imaginative. Yes. They have no problems with creating things, but as adults, we're like, what do you mean we play? What does that mean? And so Stuart Brown was a violence researcher turned play therapist, because he realized that what kids who became violent lacked was this unorganized play. And so I think that really aligns with that whole experience of, if every experience around cake was a traumatic one, right? That of course the body keeps the score and she remembers that. And it's just not a comfortable experience. That how cool is it that she gets to experience it in a new way now, where it's like, yeah, you know what? That's fun. I was going to even say too, for me, I don't enjoy birthday cake. Like it's just not, there's just so many other things I would rather eat. I didn't even get dessert on my birthday. And you know what? I loved it. One of my clients actually gave me a cake, which was fine, but it was so sweet. But in terms of like, we were out to eat and I was like, I'd rather eat more of my dinner than eat dessert. And that's okay
Yeah.
too, right? And so that goes back to that body autonomy of, you get to decide. Again, I'm going to reward or a star or make me a good person because I don't like that or don't want it. But yeah, so Beth, I don't know if you want to finish your thoughts because I know you got interrupted.
I honestly don't even know where it cut me off. So I'll just trust that you guys had a good conversation while I was going.
Yeah, no, it was, I think that's so fascinating because it's not the perspective I would have had on it, but I think it's so interesting to think about that, you can experience food in so many ways, and just because you can't eat it doesn't mean you can't get some of that experience out of it and end up getting some satisfaction and fulfillment really from it. So I think that's just really interesting. And yeah, thank you for sharing
obviously
that. Yeah.
You're welcome. You'd want to be careful again if you have a predisposition to undereat, to not use that as an avoidance of not eating, right? Oh, I'll make the cupcakes and then I don't have to eat them, because if I eat the cupcakes, then I'll eat all the cupcakes, right? Wow. So it's not a tool to be used for restrictive purposes. It's just to expand the options, the freedom we have to experience our food. Eat the cupcake, play with it, I don't care, whatever, but what helps you to have a truly satisfactory experience. And it goes beyond just choosing the food and eating the food. It could be that element of play, or I don't know, whatever else it might be. But I think bringing it back to, the beginning of our conversation of, if you are under eating, if you are finding ways to not eat more or add to your diet, then get curious and ask yourself why, and how can you honor your physical, mental, emotional, even spiritual health. And so I think, again, this is nuanced and it's going to be unique to each eater, and that's okay, and that's how it's supposed to be. So just because I might eat a certain food or eat it in a certain way doesn't mean that you are wrong or I'm right. Or like, there's no judgment here. It's just exploration, and it's developing that relationship and that trust that you can have with yourself and with your food if and when you're ready for that.
I have so many thoughts. So first and foremost, I don't know if you ladies know that Beth has a book. I'm going to plug you a little bit. I love Beth's book and I use it with my clients all the time, because I really do think that making peace with food really does come back to that connection. And I just love a lot of the activities that she has in her book to help you play with your food, to help you connect. I mean, I know one of my favorite activities is like the last bite, right? Of creating the perfect last bite. Whereas, it used to be like, okay, well, I have to, keep eating because I have a little bit left of like, or you know what, I'm feeling like I'm getting to close to the end. So I'm going to create the perfect last bite, even if that means I have 2 or 3 bites left, and being okay with throwing out 2 or 3 bites. And I mean, we could break off into a whole other tangent if talking about like, food waste and, and going back to scarcity mentality. Oh shoot, I lost my other thought. But yeah, so plugging Beth's book of experiential eating.
I think, thank you. I think, again, this goes back to, if you're still thinking too much about food, even though you're now an intuitive eater, then there might still be something there that's holding you back from just experiencing full permission and full freedom. And so it's not, all of us have said this before at some point in time. It's not about the food. It's not about your body. It's not even about your health, right? It's what is preventing you from experiencing what is possible in these areas. And if there's something that's holding you back from that, that's where you get to lean in and get curious,
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So, and this is, again, that conversation that Bree and I have had a long time ago about, well, if health is your goal, whether it's in the physical realm or the, I don't know, energetic realm or whatever you want to call it, right? What would you be experiencing? What would be possible if you already had that? And then what's preventing you from doing that now, right? Whether it means like, oh, well, I would have, I don't know, I would have more choices with my food or eating habits. Okay, well, how can you explore that now? Or maybe it's, I would be able to wear fun clothes, or I'd be able to do fun things, or, interact with my kids, or like, there's a gamut of things that you are holding yourself back from experiencing now, instead of just saying, well, what would be possible? How can I experience that now? Whether, again, whether it's with food or something else. And chances are there's probably a judgment that's holding you back from having that now. And so that's what you get to lean into and get curious with.
And I think that's the freedom piece, right? That's food freedom.
Right. So. And that's your autonomy too, of I get to choose what that might be. So
yeah. I think that is a perfect place for us to end. I don't know what you ladies think.
It's been an awesome
I think so
conversation.
too. Perfect thought.
Perfect conclusive thought. Well, thank you very much, Beth, for organizing this.
Yes,
and
thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording.
Perfect.